I'm super excited today because we're going to be talking about a fascinating topic, something many of you have expressed interest in over and over. I know whenever I do a video on this, oh, I got to change that setting. Ugh, where is that coming from? Okay, hopefully I fixed it. Yes, I don't hear anybody from anywhere. All right, whenever I talk about narcissism and antisocial personality disorders, particularly when I get into talking about psychopaths, sociopaths, and the dark triad, there's a lot of interest across the board. So I thought, let's dig in really deeply into the differences between narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths. There's been a lot of controversy around this topic. Some people propose that maybe they're an extension, that sociopaths and psychopaths, maybe they're in an extreme end of a narcissistic personality disorder. And yet, interestingly enough, since the DSM-3 came out with these classifications, they have been listed as separate categories. So let's talk about why. Because I have to admit that there is a huge overlap between the two conditions, between antisocial personality disorder and between um, and personality disorder. Sorry, I had to today. I'm a little discombobulated because I'm always used to using my phone for TikTok and my iPad for Instagram, and then, of course, the computer for YouTube. And when you know that today Instagram would not go live on my iPad, so I had to completely flip it up here at the last moment. So I know that a lot of you have a lot of questions about this, as well as a lot of questions about a lot of other things. So let's talk about this first, and then we can get into your specific questions around this. So let's stick to the questions around the characteristics of MPD versus SASPD, which is antisocial personality disorder. And let's also talk about the differences between psychopathic and sociopathic types of personalities. So I actually today, again, I mean, I often do this, but I referenced back to qualities of a narcissistic personality disorder. There are 9 categories of them. Let me review them just so that I know that most of you who've been on this know what they are at this point, but I want to review them just so that we have a great starting point, and then we'll review the categories or the classification for antisocial personality disorder, which is what we're going to is the technical group that captures both sociopaths and psychopaths. So, MPD, according to the DSM-5, has to have five five of these characteristics out of 9. You have to have 5. And that is they have a grandiose sense of self-importance, and they expect to be recognized as superior without measurable achievements. That's number 1. 2, they're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or perfect love. That's category 2. Now remember, you need 5 of these. I'm gonna list 9. Number 3, they believe that they're extra special and unique, and they can only be understood by other special and high status people or institutions. That's 3. Number 4, they require excessive admiration. I would put that as any kind of attention. They require excessive adoration, admiration, worship, love, all sorts of, attention like that. Number 5, they have a sense of entitlement with unreasonable expectations of favorable treatment, and they automatically expect compliance with their expectations. Number 6, they're interpersonally exploitive. They take advantage of others to achieve their own ends. Number 7, they lack empathy and are unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of other people. Number 8, they're envious of others and believe that others are envious of them. And number 9, they show arrogance, they're haughty in their attitudes or behaviors. So those are the 9 criteria, and you need to have 5 in order to be diagnosed by a mental health clinician like myself or like a physician, psychiatrist, psychologist. You'd have to see somebody like that who's licensed to diagnose in order to receive a diagnosis. Now, one of the things that we often remind everybody is that this is on a continuum. So there are people who are from mild all the way to severe, and that somewhere we all fall somewhere on the spectrum. We can't really get away from having these basic needs because if you think about the healthy component of NPD, it's really confidence in having good self-esteem, knowing that you have value. This is sort of this warped, twisted, and extremely egocentric and selfish, I would say. It's just like completely uh, obsessed with oneself. And they've found that the brain of people with empathy actually is different. It looks different. There's areas that are overly active, and there's other areas that actually are underactive. Okay, so before we start talking about comparison and contrasting, so let's talk about antisocial personality disorder. This gets a little tricky because antisocial personality disorder, some people think that there are actually two, maybe even three types of people inside this group. Now, I didn't mention that there are subtypes to NPD as well. I just put up a video today of 5 different subtypes: overt, the covert, the hero, the the antagonistic, and the malignant. So there are 5 subtypes inside of NPD, but we kind of think of this group as sort of 3 different groups: the sociopath, the psychopath, and possibly the dark triad, if you've ever heard of that. And for some reason, my throat's really tight today. I don't know why, so excuse me. Sorry about that. So let's talk about this. What is an antisocial personality disorder? You need to have three or more of 7 criteria. They need to be over 18, and you need to be showing these 3 signs since the age of 15, okay? So you need 3 of these. There's 7 of them altogether. Start It has to occur before or since the age of 15, and you need to be over 18 before you can be diagnosed. Number 1, a failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors. So in other words, there's a repeating performance of illegal acts. Number 2, the deceitfulness with repeated lying, uses of aliases, conning others for personal profit or pleasure. 3, impulsivity or a failure to plan ahead. Number 4, irritability and aggressiveness as indicated by repeated fights and assaults. Number 5, reckless disregard for the safety of self and others. Number 6, consistent irresponsibility as indicated by repeated failures to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. And number 7, lacks remorse as indicated by indifference or rationalization when they hurt, mistreat, or is stolen from someone else. There you go. So that's side by side, categories for MPD and the categories for antisocial personality disorders. I found in planning for this live 3 different articles that do a really nice job of differentiating them from each other, and I have now put it inside my link. It's called Dr. McAvoy's reference list, and it's near the top. So if you'd like to read a really nice 3 nice articles that sort of differentiate narcissistic personality disorder versus antisocial personality disorder, you can find that. It's really helpful. I thought they did a nice job at kind of, how are they like and how are they different. But you can tell as you've listening to these categories, there's a big overlap between these 2 criteria. The overlap, here's what I see. The overlap is they both lack empathy. They're both extremely exploitive. They both think that they're extra special or superior human beings. And there is a level, yeah, and I kinda mentioned already, exploitation. I'm thinking of deceit. There is a level of deceitfulness, although it's not emphasized with MPD in the DSM-5, there is a level of deceitfulness as they sort of believe that they're entitled and do things that they need to do because of the entitlement. But here's where I see that they're different. Notice with the narcissistic personality disorders, what was not mentioned was law law, breaking the law. There wasn't a chronic history of getting in trouble with authorities. And with antisocial personality groups, you'll see that they do that. And the other thing that wasn't really mentioned was, and here's something that's kind of more subtle based on theory. And as for those of you who don't know that I'm a psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. I was trained in a graduate program that actually spent a lot of time on personality disorders. It had several faculty members who had written books on the topic that I was able to take classes with. So I got to kind of really hear, especially kind of more the psychoanalytic, psychodynamic theory behind personality disorders. Now I know that maybe not everybody agrees with those theories, and I know maybe more right now it's more popular to use cognitive behavioral as a treatment modality, but I really think that psychodynamic and that has a root with Freud and Jung, Winnicott, and um, uh, blocking out his name, Heinz, Kohut. Those types of people did a really nice job of spending a lot of time breaking down the back end, why someone is sort of wired the way that they're wired. So here's one of the other differences that you can't hear when you read the DSM-5, but if you were to look at the theoretical understanding of them, that it becomes emphasized is that there is a callousness to antisocial personality disorders that doesn't seem to be there with narcissistic personality disorders. Now, I know a lot of you are like, wait, wait, wait. They hurt us. They disregard us. They don't seem to care about the fact that they're stealing from us and all sorts of things like that. But what I'm talking about is narcissists tend to feel entitled and they're jealous. They're competitive and they're jealous. They resent your success and they resent your accomplishments. It's rooted in insecurity and fear and shame. And then there's this kind of this almost rageful, it's very seething, it's very quiet, but it's almost this sense of they should have what they think that they don't have. And they think somehow that everybody else is coming out ahead. And that anything good in your life, they think is a takeaway from their own. But what is different about the antisocial group, the sociopath, the psychopath, and the dark triad is they know they're better than you, and they're not terribly insecure about that. And they because they're better than everybody in the world, they believe they have a right to these things, and there's really they don't really recognize you as a person. You're more of a tool. I mean, both of them objectify people, but there's this coldness, this your feelings don't even show up on the map. They're just unconcerned, and if they manipulate you in order to get something, it's usually more through intimidation or extreme strategy. I'm not explaining it really well, and I happen to have known and lived around sociopaths and psychopaths. I'm trying to also describe experientially what it's like. There's just this almost like something's broken inside of them. They don't connect. Whereas narcissists, they connect, but it's a shaky, insecure, angry, jealous connection. For an antisocial personality disorder, it's just kind of ruthless. That's the word I kept feeling whenever I'm around these individuals. They're just ruthless about their relationships because they just believe it should be this way. Here's another big difference. They don't need your admiration. They don't even care if you exist. You simply are a consumable that they will go through and use in order to get what they want. There's a new movie out that's on Apple TV right now that just launched. It has a great cast, and it's called Sharper. It's called Sharper, and it's all about cons, how people are ruthlessly setting up other people in order to con them. I love how it starts because you see the con and you sense something's a little off, but you can't tell who's cutting whom until they reveal it's like broken into snippets, and then suddenly you see like, oh man. But it's kind of this series of more and more sophisticated con artists going after each other. I would say all of those individuals in that movie, although in some ways they seem a little narcissistic, those that's a great picture of an antisocial personality disorders meeting each other. And it has like John Lithgow. There's a redheaded actress that's been around a long time that was in one of the Bond movies. I can't think of her name. She's in it. Yeah, it's a really good. So if you want to watch a movie that's new and recent and it's all about con artists, it's called Sharper, like sharp but sharper. And they even define what is sharper. It means people who live by their wit is how they define it. That's what it's really about, people who live by deception, ruthless deception. So, yeah, if you wanna see a great kind of, example of antisocial personality disorders in motion, I highly recommend checking out Apple's movie that just was released. So, Julianne oh, my Julia I'm gonna I'm gonna block on her name. Maybe somebody's seen it and know who I'm talking about. Yeah, Sharper, it's called Sharper. Alright, so I kind of now just laid them out, and I proposed a question. The question I proposed today was, "Who's the real master manipulator?" The thing is yeah, Julianne Moore. Yes, thank you, Julianne Moore. Um, they all are master manipulators. If they were to meet each other and had to do it like a duel, like a one-off, who's the worst person or the worst type, I would have to say it's the dark triad personality disorder is probably the worst, because they have another type of characteristic blended in as a Machiavellian characteristic, which is this charming, seductive, charismatic, soothing person. Think back to the court days, when we had kings and queens and you had to live by your wit. They would have been the one who has the ear of the king, and they know just the right thing to sweet talk. They seduce everybody they meet. I would say that probably is the worst of the group. So before I start, like, looking at your questions and let's talking about all of this, one of the questions I know that gets asked to me a lot is, "What's the difference between sociopath and psychopath? Why even differentiate them?" I think if we go to Robert Hare, Hare, Robert Hare's work, he would say, and he was probably the first he even has a psychopathic checklist, so if you kinda get really interested in saying, "Okay, is a checklist?" And by the way, I have a free quiz. If you wanna know if your partner is more narcissistic or more antisocial personality disorder, it actually helps you categorize your partner, and it also if your partner is both, they're kind of a malignant narcissist, they would be considered a narcissistic sociopath. So if you're interested in that, you can find it in my links. But Robert Hare did this lots of research into this topic, and he says the primary difference between psychopaths and sociopaths is that psychopaths are made and psychopaths are born and sociopaths are made. So what happens? I know that if you guys listen to me any length of time, I really kind of say, "Hey, stay away from trauma and abuse." It's not that simple. Trauma doesn't create NPD more than that. It's gotta have some genetic pieces to it, because you know, think of so here's your test question. If you think it's just trauma and just abuse, here's one, and it's a shocking statistic. People who get in a narcissistic abusive relationship, 90% have PTSD. 90%. 70%, it becomes pervasive and chronic. It becomes CPTSD. So if this happened to you early enough, shouldn't then you become an NPD and or ASPD, right? If abuse and trauma creates these personality disorders, then every one of us, there should be this disproportionate amount of us suddenly now have NPD, right? No, that's not what happens. So it isn't trauma in itself that causes these conditions. It's more than that. Things are I wish things were that simple because it'd be that simple to fix, but it's not that simple to fix. It's a What they're finding is it's a biosocial combination of factors. So some of it's genetic, maybe some of it is upbringing, some of it is based on what happens in your life. Maybe there's an activating event that turns some genetics on, like it's something that we still don't know. But what they found though is psychopaths tend to have different types of genetics. They also have very unique brain structures. They're considered neuroatypical. They belong along with autistic and ADHD. Believe it or not, psychopath is also atypical, neurologically atypical. So they tend to be more sociopaths. Yeah, their brain structure starts to change too, but they find that that group tends to have extreme abuse, a lot of violence. There's a lot of violence against their mothers and their homes. There's just a lot of chaos for this group, and they tend to be more impulsive. Uh, yes, they're ruthless. They're hot-headed. They're volatile. And so when it really you're probably gonna be shocked to find this shocking as well. When they compare the 2 between sociopaths and psychopaths, they found that psychopaths are the more risky group because of their impulsivity. Whereas the psychopaths are not as high on impulsivity, they're just kinda cold-blooded and checked out and in fact, they are poor. Here's another interesting study I found. Psychopaths are poor at reading facial expressions. So, say, for example, if they were to watch me, they would have a hard time knowing what I'm feeling. They tend to miss the cues of people getting upset or miss the cues of people being really sad. They just tend to not be aware. They're not good at pick something about their brain's different enough, they don't pick those up. Which if you find isn't that interesting? That makes sense because if you're a psychopath and you're doing something very upsetting to those around you and you can't read the faces that says, "I'm upset," then it doesn't affect you, you know? You would miss the cue and then you wouldn't correct yourself because you wouldn't see it. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, so I think which is the real master manipulator? I think that's the dark triad personality, which is so much we don't know about it that I really can't speak a lot about it, and some people think, "Well, maybe it's not a real thing," but I don't know. I think that would be a nasty group to lead. So, I'm gonna start reading your questions and see what you guys have been saying. Um, I don't Phoenix, you asked me what Jordan Peterson thinks about PTSD. Why don't you tell me what he thinks? I don't know what he thinks. So, I'd be really curious about that. And thank you guys for sharing this and for liking this. It really helps me when you do that. I appreciate that a lot. And I'm going backwards now to see what people have written. Would MPD be motivated enough to do physical harm, like manipulating or hurting other people's pets? Yeah, that's a great question you're asking, Phoenix. Okay, so back in the day, and I don't know if this is still true anymore. I would have to go back to look, but when I was going through school, we looked for a triad of behaviors in childhood to indicate this person had a conduct disorder, which is the precursor to an antisocial personality disorder. So conduct disorder, there tend to be 3 things that you'd look for. And why these 3 things, remember, they're just co-occurring. It's not that they caused it, they just happen to be showing up. And that was they tend to be late bedwetters, they like to set fires, and cruelty to pet and animals. So if you met somebody who's doing those 3 things, that tended to be a warning that you may have a budding psychopath on your hands. Now, is that been substantiated by more research? I don't know. But what it I would say, to answer your question, NPD is a narcissist prone to do physical harm. Here's the thing, I think I think these disorders are like Venn diagrams. So you circles. So think of 3 circles. You've got the narcissist in one circle, the sociopath in another circle, and the sociopath in the 3rd circle. I think they blend. They think they get over top of each other, and they have co-diagnoses. So a person who's doing physical harm to pets and animals, I would say is showing antisocial personality disorder traits. Eh, because narcissists don't tend to do break the law a lot. Yeah, they're breaking the law in the sense they don't regard other human beings as human and they're being exploitive, but when you have this deliberate, law-breaking pattern, this deliberate pattern of, harm to other people, deception, conning, stealing, that type of thing, you're now moving into the category of antisocial personality disorder. And actually today, I hadn't seen it written like this before, and I realized that, boy, man, I've known a lot of people who fit ASPD in my life. I've been around a lot of it, actually, and my ex certainly fit that category very, very well. So, yeah, he was a narcissist, but he was also had antisocial personality disorder, definitely. Scary group, very scary group. Okay, I'm going back and seeing what other questions have come in. So let me check out on this one. Yeah, so I think when I hear Dr. Ramani, I know that she's one of them has kinda come out and said, I think their AASPD is an extreme end of narcissism. I understand where she's coming from, but I also think if it really was that, then the people who write DSM-5, and I'm not saying they're not prone to propaganda, they don't have their own political agenda. Yes, yes, they do. I do think that, but I do think that they would for just simplicity, they would have put it on the same category, definitely. So yeah, if you're in that situation where you have somebody that you know is harming animals, please, you guys, that's an indication that you have somebody who's who's dangerous, dangerous Yeah, Vanessa, I would say someone who's harming animals certainly is more of an under the antisocial personality disorder, not just a narcissist. But here's another thing that many of you guys make an error, and it's probably our fault, probably educators' fault, like myself. I know it just because of my graduate training that these diagnoses aren't like lock and key. It's not like when you walk through a door and you're a narcissistic personality disorder that you've locked out all other personality disorders. No, 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 no. You can have a mix of all sorts of personality disorders. You can have ODD, you can have obsessive compulsive disorder and be narcissistic. You can be narcissistic and show up having obsessive compulsive personality disorder traits. You can be any combination you could possibly think of, people can have, absolutely. So you can be an antisocial personality disorder and have a depression. It doesn't happen very often, but it can. Now, here's one of the things that it does. Okay, well, the ones that we do lock out each other, we call differential diagnoses. So those are disorders that look a lot alike, but if you have that other disorder, then it means it's not this disorder. Like, for example, if you're a person who's in the throes of an addiction, say you have a narcotic addiction that's really, like, end stage, you've really are struggling, you're destroying relationships, you're breaking the law, you've lost your home, your situation, you're gonna look a lot like an antisocial personality disorder. You're gonna very much alike. Your behaviors are gonna be similar. But what they found, and this was fascinating, I got to hear this came out of continuing education on the opioid crisis. So this guy was looking at how to help pain management in a different way, and he was sort of talking about the addictions to opioids. And he said that, when someone is sober and clean, they revert to their pre-morbid personality. So just because the addiction took them into the throes of very destructive behavior, very destructive personality characteristics, that's due to the disease of the addiction, and when the addiction is treated and treated well, then the person that they were before the addiction occurred resumes, comes back. Now, granted, they've gotta do a lot of growth because while they're under the throes of the disease, their emotional development is stunted, so there's a lot of work that has to be done to sort of kind of resume growing again, but the disease has changed their personality. And here's another one that that will cause confusion and that will look like some of the other ones, and that is bipolar disorder. So those who have struggled with manic and depressive disorders, when they're in the throes of a manic phase, they may look very antisocial personality disorder, and they may look very narcissistic because the manic phase of the bipolar disorder is excessive superiority and grandiosity. There's all this energy, impulsivity, and you can so if a person has this sort of fluctuating state of emotional state, like extreme highs and extreme lows, and they seem to lose touch with reality, and they believe it almost like they're godlike, you may be seeing bipolar disorder, not narcissistic personality disorder. Yeah. It is interesting, Kim, how some some people tend to see animals more than they see people. I have seen that. I've seen where, those that do that, I I would love to know what you think. I'm just now speculating. Please don't quote me. I'm just speculating. It almost feels more like a psychopathic tendency where they just don't see people and they don't really, like, relate to people. True blue psychopaths are odd. They're just strange people, they're not always doing harmful things, although they don't care, but they just don't understand emotions. They don't get what's going on in the lives and the minds of the people. They're just strange, and they'll do really odd things. So I could see that. I could see that some people would treat their pets better than they treat people, absolutely. Is addictions caused by biology or trauma? You know, addictions tend to run in families. I don't know if you've noticed that. So there's a strong kind of biological genetic component to it. I don't think addiction is related to trauma at all. I wouldn't say that there's any connection. Yeah, a trauma can make somebody, um, who has an addictive propensity, predisposition for addictions. A trauma could then make them, like, fall into it and have an issue. I saw that. I had a good friend of mine that I love dearly who, she actually was a counselor, and, she had a life change that upset her kind of physiology, and then she ended up becoming an alcoholic, and yeah, I mean, it was so but I she had to kind of because the physical condition that she had that sort of changed things, a lot of other people have, they don't necessarily have an addiction, but it was just sort of a vulnerability for her. Yeah, really great question. No, sociopaths are actually if you do a research arc you do the research on it, you'll find that sociopaths are hotheads. They have the volatile moods, and they're very impulsive, and so they're more likely to lash out and do something kind of in the moment, the heat of the moment, where psychopaths tend to be more cold-blooded and ruthless. They're more strategic. Yeah, if you anger a psychopath and you do something harmful. So just to kinda give perspective, my grandmother was a psychopath, ruthless woman. I was her favorite. I was her golden child, which I'll tell you, that was not a prized position. It meant I walked on eggs around her and had to be super, super careful and had to do things her way, really, because I watched her hold grudges and just cut people off here and there, so if you fall out of favor she hated women. She was a misogynist. Just really had no respect for women as a whole. Yeah, it was and she would definitely break the law. She would do stuff that was very deceptive, but it wasn't she didn't need your she didn't care if you liked her. She had no need for your admiration. In fact, she would even you tried to butter her up, she would see through that and sort of think less of you for that. It was yeah, just a ruthless woman. Yeah, and it was wild being her favorite. Like I said, it was not a comfortable position. But I got good treatment. I got extra special things that my sisters didn't have, but I'll tell you, she was so odd that my sisters didn't resent me. They were like, "Whoa, Karen can have that. We don't really want that with her." That was what it was like. So it wasn't like I like, "Oh, yeah, I really win here," but yeah, and she's a person, if I came across her in my real day-to-day life, I would have really avoided her. She would do things like, like, she was a nurse, an LPN, and she would think she knew better than the doctors, and she might even countermand the treatment, like, and not get caught. Do really, like, sly things like that. Yeah, she's no longer alive, which is why I feel free to talk about her. She's not here to defend herself. So, yeah. Yeah, so Dr. Peterson talks about developing your I don't know if you meant that, Phoenix. And the inner psychopath is dealing with PTSD and half I don't know. I would have to check into it. I don't really know what Jordan Peterson thinks about of psychopaths and sociopaths. That's interesting. I'll have to check into it. Okay, so describe people want me to describe psychopaths, sociopaths, and the dark triad again. Dark triad I know the least about. I just want you to know I know the least about, or dark triad personality disorder. Let me get back. So a sociopath tends to be made. They tend to come from very chaotic, abusive homes. There's usually a lot of violence towards their mother. They have tended to identify with the power dynamic and then want to emulate that and then become sort of a picture of that. They're they're the hothead. They have a they shift moods really fast. They're very impulsive, ruthless. They have no empathy or no regard for other people. They believe themselves to be superior to other people, and they're not law-abiding at all. They're very scary people, but they can be charming. Sociopath of the 2, sociopath wasn't made, so they have a little bit better ability to read people's emotions, and then use that against the people that they're around. Psychopaths, on the other hand, tend to be born, and they have a lot of differences in their brain neurology. Their brain looks different. They have trouble recognizing emotions on other people's faces. They tend to have a hard time knowing what emotions are, feeling them, and relating around them. Yes, they believe themselves superior, so they don't see themselves as needing to follow the law. They just have this callousness when it comes to human beings, and they're a little bit better with being strategic and planners, but they can be impulsive too. And they do things that justify the means. Both of those groups do things that the means justify the ends. If they think that the reason they're doing it is a good reason, they'll do it. They'll do it for whatever reason they want. And, yeah, it's not particularly troubling to them. The dark triad personality disorder is a combination of a narcissist, is with psychopathic tendencies, and they have Machiavellian traits, which Machiavellian is from he wrote a book a long time ago, and he was kind of more of a I don't know more his history, but he was think of the consummate charmer, the person who knows just the right thing to say in order the seducer, but not I'm not talking just sexually, they're the seducer. So they're very good at, weaseling themselves in and saying just what you wanna hear. They'll use your needs and your desires as a way to kind of poison your mind to have influence over you to get their way. So they have that combination of traits. Actually, I would say they're the creepiest group because they're very good at reading the room, and they're very, very manipulative and deceptive, and they're also very, do very dark things. I don't know who coined the term dark triad. I know it's kind of a new kind of catchy thing. It's not simply a social media thing. Like, some things that happen come about because we've defined it here, and I would not say, Kate, that that's happened, but actually something that's being looked into in the realm of psychology. So but there's not much known about it. Not much. Yeah, I agree, Sarah, that sociopaths tend to come from violent, abusive homes. My ex was a sociopathic narcissist. He was clearly antisocial personality disorder. Um, you can't believe a single thing that he said, really. Everything he said was some version of what and it wasn't even that he needed yeah, he wanted to look good. He just believed that his version was right, It was yeah. So here's an example. I found out from his first wife that he fled the marriage because he was in trouble at work, and the law was after him, but he'd also been cheating on her, and they had a baby who had a disability, and so, he didn't wanna be and this was he was living in a place where he would have to pony up to help pay for the kid's care, and he didn't wanna be in trouble, and he didn't wanna pay for the kid's care. He didn't really like Kerry enough, so he fled the country fled the country. So that's very ASPD, like, cold, ruthless, exploitive, and they're above the law, above the rule. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, and it's about that ethics are ruthlessly based on results. Interesting. Again, so that's what you're saying, the end justifies the means. The end justifies the means. Yeah. Draconian ethics, yeah. That would be scary to live in a situation of ethics like that lack of ethics. And if any of you happen to know across any of these platforms who's doing research on dark triad, I would love to know. I didn't bring that information in with me, so I could tell you who's doing it, but yeah, it's scary. So, here's a question. I know, Brittany, you're kind of thinking you wanna go with what today. So I don't know who can ask who can ask this question. But of all of what I've said today, how many of you think that you've been in a relationship with just somebody who's just has narcissistic personality traits only? Or how many of you think you had been in a relationship with somebody who's had both narcissistic personality traits and antisocial personality traits? And now how many of you think that you were in a relationship with someone who really primarily had antisocial personality traits? I'd love to know that. 'Cause I here's the thing that I've noticed. I've noticed that we tend to lump everybody into saying they're a narcissist, and they're really not. They're different groups, and they have sort of different mentalities, different intentions, different way of behaving. Yeah, I would love to know who you think you've been in a relationship with. And mind right, I'm sorry you can't understand a word that I'm saying. I'm speaking English, and there's at least 100 other people who can understand what I'm saying today. So maybe this is just not the right life for you today. So, and Vanessa, did I answer your question? Yeah, so your partner was diagnosed with OD, which is oppositional defiant ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, which would have been diagnosed as, oh, it's a tech problem, Myri. I'm sorry. I hope the rest of you are not having that tech problem. Really sorry that's happening. Yeah, so you believe now, Vanessa, that he was antisocial and a covert. Interesting, interesting. So psychopathology, technically it's development. Well, psychopathology really means everything that goes wrong with people. That's a catch-all phrase for the human condition that is not normal. So that would catch. So when you go to a psychopathology class in college, you're going to college to learn about depression and anxiety and everything. It's a catch-all about everything. So, yeah. And there's lots of reasons why that happens, tons and tons of reasons. It would be hard to categorize why that they're what it is. So I think there's a spiritual aspect to all of them. Oh, absolutely, because I think we're mind, body, soul, and heart. Mind, body, soul, and spirit. So, yeah, I do think that there's thinking life, there's soul and spirit to me. I guess I would say that's the spirit, which is sort of I don't know how to put that into words. It's a hard thing to describe and kind of moves us into religion, which those who know don't know that I don't talk about that here. Not because I'm not a person who has faith, but just because I like to keep this platform clean about mental health issues. It gets really into funny places when we go there. Not that we can't do that on purpose, but it tends to sort of make things murky. I'm glad you figured out it wasn't your fault. Yeah. So how do you get someone these traits to be evaluated? Ooh, good question. Well, here's the problem with these disorders is that these groups, a lot of I would say borderline personality disorders do not fit this category, what I'm about to say. But those who are antisocial personality disorder as well as narcissistic personality disorder don't see themselves as a problem. They don't. They see you as the problem. So they would say, "Well, you're not happy, go get help, but I'm not getting help because I'm just fine. You're the one having a problem here." That's what they would say. So they're not gonna see anybody. Usually the way they get into treatment is because they've been court ordered, and even then, if any of you who heard the webinar with Sandra Brown, if you missed it, that webinar is available for purchase, which is a fabulous webinar, by the way. Sandra Brown wrote the book several books, How to Spot a Dangerous Man. She also wrote the book Women Who Love Psychopaths, which is really she was talking about everybody related to, um, the kind of pathological, dark, malevolent, hurtful types of personality disorder. She wasn't just limiting it to antisocial personality disorder. She was saying it's about narcissists too. And she said she worked like I don't know how many years. She had a group therapy that she ran, and I think it was like maybe 30 years. She'd say she'd walk into the group and she had a group of women who were antisocial personality disorders, and she had a group of men. So they were kind of like separated by genders. And she said that the group that scared her the worst was the women. But she said whenever she would do these group therapies, she said the hair on the back of her neck would rise. It was really scary to be in a room with these individuals. And, yeah. And why were they there? Where they'd gotten in trouble with the law. That's how they were sent. But she said that she felt like it was she called it babysitting. She said she felt like if you wanna hear that whole interview, that hour and a half of interview, it's available. I it's in it's called um, how does how could I have fallen for a dangerous man? That's the title. How could I have fallen for a dangerous man? Yeah, fascinating. So, the sound is broken up. Huh, that's really I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know what's happening. Huh. You know what? I'm gonna stop something and see if that makes a difference. Okay, I stopped Oh, I'm really disappointed to hear that that's happening over on YouTube today. I'm sorry about that. Um, what attachment styles do narcissists have? They have all of them. I don't know if they'd have secure, though. I don't think they'd have secure. They would have a lot of them are weak, but they also would have, you also would see them with the anxious attachment as well, and then certainly with the disorganized, which they don't trust anybody. So but probably not secure. That's another myth that we have fallen into. People really love attachment disorders, and I think, attachment disorders is an amazing theory. And by the way, this might sound better, Vanessa. Can you guys American people mind right? Can you guys hear me better? I was running another program at the same time, and maybe it's causing problems. So I um, but what happens and we do the same thing. "Oh, I'm still cutting off. Oh, shit. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have swore. Sorry about that." I don't know what's happening today. It's really weird. I'm doing the same thing I always do. I would have to, like, stop and restart, but now, hmm. One more thing to add to my list, and I'll try that next time. I will, like, restart my computer and make sure everything is up and running. What happens is that I've noticed with my sound, and sound is very vulnerable with this computer, that if I run the program to like, keep it running, don't do a shutdown and turn on, that sometimes some, like, thing gets set wrong. I know everybody who's on Wi-Fi here is fine. We're not talking about the Wi-Fi, so sorry about that. But, I was back to attachments disorders and some of the one of the errors that we make, and this comes out of it's kind of social media problem, I think, is that we assume that, that we want to make connections that are that they're not there. There's no connection. So it would be easy for us to say, "Hey, I had an avoidant narcissist, then all narcissists are avoidant." No, no, I know a narcissist right now. I have one in my life, and whenever this key person in this person's life is not around them, ooh, boy, are they anxious, checking in constantly, calling constantly, emailing constantly, texting constantly. They're constantly in touch, just constantly. So, it has nothing to do with no, those of you who are on that can't hear me well, I'm on 2 other platforms. You can jump over to them and catch it there. Sorry about this. I apologize. But I'm on TikTok and I'm on Instagram. Same stuff, same stuff. Yeah, yeah, it's easy. We like to kind of, like, explain things by saying, "Oh, this is why," and then if they fix the attachment, we fix them. No, no, we don't. Unfortunately, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. I in fact, what I'm gonna do now is just to sort of end YouTube because it's such I hear it's destroyed over there, so I'm sorry. But so if you guys wanna continue the discussion, please talk on different platforms. Yeah, I don't know what happened here. I apologize. Okay, so now I'm off